journalism is kind of one-sided in one way. It's like, okay, that's going to reach people through media. And it's like, once again, that media that could be pertaining to that story could be super one-sided. So I think it's just something that's going to come eventually in time, but kind of look back at history and be like, what were we doing back then?
Welcome back to the Corner Talks podcast. I have my good friend here.
How's it going, man? Happy to be back.
No, it shouldn't be about anything. Like, this is one life.
Yep, one life? Like, fucking do it.
My guy.
Like, she just got it. She totally understood it.
20 years old when I started just watching a lot of movies.
And it tells a story. I want to tell a story.
Today I have a very special guest, talented entrepreneur and podcast producer, Daniel Hill. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Pleasure to be here, man.
Pleasure of all mine too. Man, I love the setup. I love the background for those watching on video. He's got a crazy background. This is from the renowned podcast called Down to the Wire, co-hosted by Jacob Racco, who had the pleasure of actually being a guest on the podcast, as you are. So yeah, I love the setup, man. And the bucket hat. I gotta get myself one.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
A little bit overpaid. I had to get it from Europe. So it was
it
was a bad decision, but I'm just like, man, at the end of the day, it's worth it. But I've been waiting for years for the specific hat, so glad I got it.
No, I love it, man. I love it. It's all about the aesthetic, right? We're in that business, the entertainment business, right? So we gotta flash what we can.
100%.
That's awesome, man. So a lot of things to talk about, including that McDonald's sign that's behind you. Trying to figure out how you got your hands on that. But yeah, so after hosting Jacob on a previous episode, he informed me that you serve as co-producer on Down to the Wire Studios, being involved with several aspects of its production and social media distribution. Why did you decide to get involved in the podcast sector of the entertainment industry?
So I don't know if Jacob actually told you, I'm actually his third cousin.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know this.
Yeah. So there's actually lots of backstory on how things kind of came about today.
Of course.
So I moved to Ottawa actually just over a year ago. I came here January of last year.
Nice.
So I'm originally from Thunder Bay. So I always knew about this like cousin named Jacob in Ottawa that like had some podcast. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then my mom kept talking about this guy. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll check it out. And then over the course of the year before I even moved here, I was actually a fan of the show. So like every single episode that would drop, and I was like, okay, that first episode was actually pretty funny. And then just kept watching and watching. And next thing you know, I was a fan of the show. And then I had yet to even meet Jacob yet, but here I am watching all his videos and whatnot. So the moment I was actually able to move to Ottawa, come just visit the studio for the first time, it was a pretty interesting thing to be like, oh, this is my cousin, never met you before. And honestly, we just bonded right away.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, Jacob Racco strikes me as, someone that has this personable, character about him, right? That kind of like draws everybody in and like, makes everybody feel welcome. So, I'll mention it again, how I been acquainted with him. I was the director of the behind the scenes content for Nima Naz, headlining his I'm Your Sugar Daddy tour. And we stumbled upon your podcast along the way. And Jacob, invited us in with open arms and like, just kind of I documented pieces of like the podcast, the whole setup that you guys got, the very relaxed, kind of casual street kind of aesthetic podcast production studio that you got going on in one of the behind the scenes vlogs. So yeah, it was quite memorable. There's even like a picture frame or a photo of a monkey with headphones, some sort of artistic piece. Yeah. So I actually caught that on camera and I posted that myself because I thought it was so thought provoking. So yeah, it's very interesting to see how it all kind of like manifests. And I love how you said like at first, like you weren't too crazy about like the idea of podcasting, or like it just didn't really stir up any interest for you, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like as you see the content more and more unfold, you get kind of like, I call it a creative context, a visual context as to what you're in for, and here we are today.
100%. It's just even the first time I came to the studio, always just watching it for that year of like this thing that was just on my screen, actually like, oh my god, there was a McDonald's sign, there's the monkey with the headphones on. It was just one of those things where I was like, that's the item. Whereas like they're like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, no, I'm like fanboying. So even when I met them, even though it's like my cousin John, is like, shout out to everyone at Down to the Wire, just great group of guys all together, just super accepting. Kind of as soon as I came, started hanging with the group, just overall, just really felt like home as soon as I came here.
Yeah, it's a hangout podcast. That's what stood out to me the most. You know, it's kind of like, just like you said, a bunch of guys just shooting the shit, almost like a frat house in a way. And I just really enjoyed the setup. I thought it was really unique and creative. And I have to ask you, for a side note, like the McDonald's sign, are you allowed to disclose how you guys got your hands on that?
Yeah, so it was actually Jacob. I can't remember if he started talking about this on the podcast or even brought it up, but
I
I'm
might
pretty
have
sure
missed it. Yeah, I might have
he used
missed
to
it.
work at the McDonald's and
Oh,
then
okay.
somehow I think there's multiple stories of the true
Right, right.
origin. So
Like when he
I
used to
cannot
work
even
there.
remember what the true one. So yeah, it was Jacob that used to work at McDonald's, but
Okay,
I don't know what the original origin story is.
because that's the
But there
street
was
sign.
yeah, it's the actual street sign. And they actually took it away for a little bit during the episodes. And I'm just like, guys, like that is the sickest sign. I was like, put that thing back in the
But
corner.
yeah,
So yeah, there's a few episodes without it, and I was like, no, it needs to go back. It's honestly my favorite part of the studio for
no, that's
sure.
so wild. I'm surprised like McDonald's corporate hasn't reached out to you guys and claimed it back.
Yeah,
But why
yeah,
would they,
we're
right?
probably waiting for the day. So
Yeah, that's wild, man. Yeah, like I won't ask further, but that's crazy because it's not just a sign for, again, those that you are just listening. It's the curbside sign, the one that's directing you into the plaza. So amazing that you guys got your hands on it, and it just kind of goes again with the whole aesthetic of the production. You got the
100%.
brick walls, you got the loft kind of looking studio space. I believe you have like Spider-Man cookie jars and like like exotic little plants and like just all these absurd kind of obscure kind of things that all kind of blend together. But that's what creates something unique and expressive. That's great, man. And so you joining the podcast, again, you're a co-producer. That's how you identify. That's how I saw you on Instagram. How would you describe your role at Down to the Wire Studios?
I would say honestly, the rest of the guys are like they put everything together. Like they're just the prime
Yeah.
contributors.
Yeah.
Myself of just like show any success they've ever had. It's just like they work their asses off to like
You get
get the
there.
guests that they
Yeah.
have. Just like even though we haven't like made it yet, I keep telling them like we're gonna. It's only a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when.
I
So
love
kind of
that.
like my role, I would say, is just kind of like that mother figure at times where I'm just like, guys, clean. Like I'll tell you the stuff that you don't want to hear. Cause even when me and Jacob, before even kind of I was officially part of the team, where
Right.
it is okay, like where's my role? And I still feel like that's kind of like up in the air. But I would say consulting, that's really a big thing that I kind of enjoy doing. And even when I told them, I was like, I really don't care. Like I'll tell you the stuff that you don't want to hear. And I was kind of like fixing the little holes that are within the actual um down the wire itself of just like, okay, what's great right now, but what's bad and what can we kind of fix? So I'd say just really consulting, and that's really a big thing that I enjoy doing. Recently just kind of took over the TikTok. So that's where I feel like I'm very good at. I was just kind of playing the algorithm in that sense
Oh,
where
nice.
TikTok is just so algorithm based.
Of course. Yeah.
So as of like I'd say 2-3 weeks ago, I actually took over the TikTok, and
Nice.
since then we've had a few videos pop off, which has been great. Shout out Hassan Phil's, his videos just blown up on TikTok recently. So just been kind of knowing the market, knowing how TikTok kind of works. I'm glad it's kind of in my hands and kind of just being like pushing the content on that side.
Yeah, and that's very critical. You just kind of identified two um, pivotal values to retain as a producer, right? One being a mentor, and the other one being kind of like a social trendsetter. Just kind of identifying those two kind of opportunities, and TikTok is the place to be. Everybody says it. The algorithm is. I love how you put it. It's kind of like very dependent on what you're posting and who's seeing it, because there's that one video that no one, that could be inexplicable why it became viral. And how do you go about identifying trends? Is it just staying on it all day, like the application, and figuring out what trends are being used and who's interacting with what?
Well, even when I kind of just like got into this role, like they're amazing at Instagram. Like this content that they put out is just
Yeah.
like the edits, the Photoshop, just everything that like Down the Wire creates.
Hmm.
Even from when I was a fan, I was like, this is like high quality content. But it was
Right.
like always like on Instagram. And they would always just kind of pump out Instagram, where I was like, we need to start pumping more out on TikTok in that sense of like, let's kind of get just we have the one platform down, like we're killing it on that. But I'm like, what about the other 3-4 platforms? I was
Right.
like, I really have the Gary Vaynerchuk like kind of way about going about things, where it's just like consistent quality content. Not everything's going to go viral, but if you
Yeah.
keep putting out consistent quality content, eventually one of the videos is going to pop off. And as of like recent, like I mentioned, we did have a videos I did pretty successfully well. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, let's keep that consistent throughout the entire year, and eventually you're going to kind of see some result come from it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I love that you evoked evoked kind of Gary's name, I should say, about like, you know, in terms of content creation, because he's someone that I've kind of been you know, just eagerly close to, you know, always kind of like following his word, a disciple in a way, because
Yeah,
I
especially
love,
being with
yeah,
Nima. I was like, you definitely
yeah,
get that.
especially
It's
being
like being
surrounded by
with
Nima.
them, being with
Yeah,
a 2.0 version.
no, seriously, man. It's like, and that's how I actually connected, because I kind of channeled that spirit of, you know, Gary V, you know, expanding. Because for me, I'm a filmmaker, right? I'm a film director at heart.
Mhm.
And what film director has business in vlogging, right? Or behind the scenes, if you think about it, right? Like a conventional
100%.
filmmaker. But the reality is I wanted to expand my skill sets, and I wanted to kind of use that ideology that Gary V preaches, where you should always be looking to, you know, challenge your skill sets and your creativity, but also for the sake of putting out content, and how else to do it. So for me, it's like I can't put out a short film every month. I know it's highly ambitious, but it's not really that practical because I have other things going on in my life. So if I'm lucky, I'll create 2 short films a year. But in the meantime, all that dead space in between, what other content can I put out, instead of, you know, people like yourself saying, "Oh, what's Daniel Calderon up to?" Right? So this is where the podcast is born, and I utilize it as a writer to enhance my communication skills, you know, speaking with you, writing the questions, delivering them, but also cultivating a network, you know, a network of creatives, like-minded individuals where I learn from, you know, like having this conversation right now. I'm just kind of understanding your role at Down to the Wire Studios, you know, how expansive it is. It's not just a two-man group host with a microphone, you know, shooting the shit, talking. There's a whole team, there's a whole
Mhm.
setup. You guys taking it very serious. And like you said, it's not a matter of, you know, where the direction of the podcast is going to go. It's a matter of when, you know.
For
Um,
sure.
so it's, yeah, it's not a matter of how, it's when, right? So you guys got it all figured out in that sense, and I think that's what it's all about, right? It's just kind of like, even on the days when you don't feel it's going to stick, whether it's on a TikTok algorithm or a podcast host, guest, I mean, you got to just put it out for the sake of putting it out. I call it showing up.
Mhm. And that's one thing, even before like I kind of join with the guys, I always tell them, even if like if they're kind of on the fence about things, I'm like,
Right.
guys, I was a fan of this show. It's just like, are we funny? I was like, yes, because I could go watch Joe Rogan or I could watch Down on the Wire. And I still used to go watch Down on the Wire. So like
Nice.
that kind of speaks volumes. And the moment I went out of my way, this was still before I kind of became part of the group, was well, actually after the Neiman Naz episode with you guys.
Right.
And I texted Rocco and I went, you just held it down like from a professional standpoint with one of the biggest growing comedians that's really on the market right now. That's in
Yeah, of
Canada,
course.
North America. And I was like, you're sitting in the room with it, and like you held it down, and you did an outstanding job. I was like, that just shows how well put Down the Wire actually is.
Yeah.
Like how much potential you really have, because like, man, we've only been in perspective. It was like people have been doing this for decades. It's like they're still young at the end of the day. So it's one of those things where it's like, man, the potential is just kind of unlimited with these guys, I feel.
Yeah, speaking of Joe Rogan, like I remember him talking about the fact that he's known a lot of people that started podcasts and they haven't progressed anywhere with them, right? Whether it's
For
their lineup of guests or, you know, the subject matter they discuss, it's kind of not challenging enough for the viewer or for themselves to kind of expand. And, you know, something for myself, like with the intentions that I have, is, you know, to take it from a place of, you know, a community, like I was mentioning, a place of networking, having conversations with individuals that are creative, to a place where it's a hub, you know, for filmmakers and podcasters and entrepreneurs, you know. So it's like that, like you were saying, that mindset that you kind of need to develop and instill. And to Jacob Bracco's credit, like the hosting kind of qualities that you need to inherit in order to kind of convey an entertaining and
Definitely.
cohesive conversation.
Now, even like the fact that I'm sitting here today, even just like talking to you,
Yeah.
is like the fact that, are you aware of Thunder Bay, or like kind of like, even
Yeah,
though
I
it's a
am
city and
actually. Yeah.
whatnot?
Yeah. No, I am.
So coming from Thunder Bay to Ottawa, it's like I never thought I'd be sitting down like myself doing an interview. Never mind like being in the co-producing and trying to explain to people of like what the culture is like down there. It's like we have, I swear, like one podcast. Like that guy has been killing it. Like
That's
he has
hilarious.
people within the city, but we don't have any industry down there.
Got it.
We don't have any night scene. We don't have any fashion scene. Like if I was to wear this back home, people would be like, "Yo, what is you doing?" Like,
Yeah, what are you up
just,
to? Yeah.
and the fact that like I am kind of like, even though I'm still recent to the group, just being in the same type of room with these types of guys, like Logan Brown on the show, like his story with the weekend and how he met with Drake and
Yeah.
Drake's manager, I should say,
Mhm.
and just kind of the guests that we're having on the show, like two-time FTG Reggie, guys that I go out of my way to actually like listen to and I'm like super interested in, is like I have to pinch myself half the time. I was like,
Yeah.
me and my buddy used to actually dream about this. Like he's still on Thunder Bay, but I was like, man, I'm gonna go out to Ottawa, and I just have this vision, and kind of like the stuff I'm doing right now is like I'm literally telling you, like I'm living the dream that I once had in Thunder Bay. So
Right.
just to be even doing this with you, being part of Down the Wire, it's honestly, it's just unbelievable. Kind of what's been happening in the past year, and the fact that it's only been a year. I'm really excited for what's to come.
Yeah, for sure, man. You should be. I'm highly gratified by, that compliment, just being on the podcast. I try to incorporate as many people that I see on the rise, like up and coming, and just people I genuinely are curious about, in terms of, how they go about their careers and, whatever creative endeavors they're pursuing. But it is amazing, and I owe it to social media for that, because how else could we connect? I don't know you. We've never met. A lot of guests that I've had on here, I've only had virtual conversations. Funny enough, I have a good friend. His name is Axel. I met him through the podcast in the pandemic. Never once in person, but we always stayed in touch, kept good friends. He's a film director from Los Angeles. And next thing you know, he's like, "Hey, do you want to are you looking for a job? There's one available at Impact Theory with Tom Billion." And I said, "Yeah, of course. Like that'd be great." You know what I mean? To apply my skill sets. And what I'm saying is that a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, I finally met him in person. And it's kind of strange, right? Because it's like, we obviously went out in LA, chilled. He was nice enough to provide his place, to stay. And you're thinking like, you don't even like, he's my friend, but he's technically a stranger in the sense like I've never like actually hung out. And it's just that trust that you build because of the interaction that social media allows us to have.
Even
So
the
yeah,
sense of
sorry, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, like, one of the people that I know is well connected to Jake Bracco is City Fidelia. I was like, I've yet to meet that dude in my life. And it's just like I feel super connected to him in the sense of like I know how important he is to Down the Wire and that mentorship of just Jacob himself. So even though I've never met him, it's like to see him in person, it's just like, oh man, that's the guy that
It is surreal. Yeah, I know what you mean by that, because it's like you've been following the podcast, and again, he's your third cousin, but just seeing those guys in person, it's the way I guess the mind perceives the image, right? Like perceives these
100%.
people, right? It's like bigger than life because they're on a screen. So it's like to actually see them in person, it's like, oh my god, like you're just like us, you're just like me, you know what I mean? But there is
that's
that
the thing.
moment.
Where at the end they're like, oh, you're just a normal person.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
you're just a
sometimes
normal
even
person. Yeah,
I still always think about it. Even when I met my own cousin, I was like starstruck because it's just like this was some dude on the screen. For us, like to me, that was like me and Joe Rogan, where I was like, man, this is like for my life when I spend this many hours. Yet I've never met him. Yet I've listened to him for the past 12 episodes. So you kind of get to know somebody by listening to them for 12 hours straight.
Yeah, no, I completely understand, man. It's definitely a surreal experience, and I've had that many times where I pinched myself, like interacting celebrities or just seeing them from afar. Um, I don't know, you like kind of look closely and you realize like they're just a person. Like they itch the same way, or they like have their own like uh, fidgeting and quirks and things like that. I don't know, but that's kind of refreshing, right, in a way, because it's like they retain that humanity, the good ones, that is, right? But still bigger than life. I wouldn't say about that about Quentin Tarantino, my hero. I probably would faint or collapse if I ever ran into him.
And that's the thing, where it's like, if I met Nima Naz, he comes out with me on the street, it's just like, they'd be like, "Oh, what do you Nima talk about?" I'd be like, "I don't know. It's probably a blur because I was probably so starstruck at the time." So.
Yeah. No, it's amazing, and it's amazing too. And that's the thing, right? It's like these comedians, like those people on the rise, right? It's like they're not even to the level of like Drake yet, but at the same time, it's like the way in which social media kind of conveys these people, it allows for that opportunity to be on the same level. We live in a very strange time. Like it's possible, like there's no gatekeepers, like they're like, we the market decide who is we perceive as someone that's like a star, or of a
Oh,
celebrity
definitely.
status. Yeah. Awesome, man. So yeah, Jacob and I had several conversations pertaining to the pivotal yet controversial role of journalism and how it plays in our modern society. And this is like kind of the theme of Down to the Wire, right? It's like
Mhm.
providing some sort of Vice type style, robust journalism,
Yeah.
guerrilla style, right? It's not like a 60 minutes platform. So which is why I was drawn to the podcast for that reason, I'll be honest. But with the advent of the pandemic and allegations toward misinformation, better known as fake news, we all know that term. Many people often question the validity that news sources preach to their viewers. As a producer of Down to the Wire, how do you approach the negative connotation of journalism, even when you identify as a news outlet?
I would say is honestly just like as much as we are like reporting the news and whatnot, it's like lots of
Yeah,
it's like the back page news. So it's just like
I
at the
got
end of
you.
the day,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not that like Joe Rogan says, it's just like what do we know? We're a bunch of morons. It's like John and Jacob are just like they could have any opinion, but at the end of the day, it's just two goofballs. Like you watch our
yeah,
podcast, it's like at the end of the day, don't take it too serious. But honestly, just as a whole, like it is a serious thing, or it's just like the overall fake news side of it, or it's just like taking that information and just making sure you are being a journalist of like it's very hard because being myself, like I'm not a journalist, so I don't know of like
right,
taking one side of the story from the other.
right,
But I feel like in modern times, it's so hard to find that these days. So even myself, like I'm a very open person. I neither lean one side to the other. It's just like, hey, let me look at the situation. Or it's like I could agree with someone on one topic and then completely disagree with them on the other. And then same thing with one news source. Or it's like I believe one time that they put out amazing content, and then the next is just like, okay, what are you doing there? So it's honestly a really sticky game in the sense that like it's a very hard thing to kind of balance out. I don't know if there is a specific answer to it, but it's one of those things where it's like us as a society, we got to get better somehow at it.
yeah, of
I don't
course,
know how essentially, but
yeah,
really just holding each other accountable. But then even then, you kind of have that debate of like, okay, this person's kind of right, that person's not. So really just the consistency more than anything and accountability. I think that's really a big part about it. But who holds those people accountable? Well, society does, but who puts out kind of what the overall kind of feel of the story is and whatnot is at the end of the day, the news or journalism outlets. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if we're going to have a topic on a story about how journalism is kind of one-sided in one way, it's like, okay, that's going to reach people through media. And it's like, once again, that media that could be pertaining to that story could be super one-sided. So I think it's just something that's going to come eventually in time, but down the road, we're just kind of look back in
yeah.
history and be like, what were we doing back then?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like I like what you were alluding to, right? Is like we as a society determine the consequences, the reaction to journalism, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a news article. It's up to you to decide how it affects your life.
Mm-hmm.
And as we see in our society, it's severe, right? It's kind of like it's being pulled in so many different directions. It's being used as leverage to eviscerate enemies or bring down other ideologies that argue against our own. Um, and in a way, I like what you said, where Down to the Wire, as much as it has its own credibility and it wants to be seen in some a prestige in its own right, you're self-aware enough to know that it's satire, it's comedy, back page news, if you will, right? You're not meant to be taken so seriously that you're going to like topple, world governments. You know what I mean?
100%. It's
Hey,
just like we're
maybe,
here having fun, but at the end of
yeah,
the day, we're still are doing journalism, but we're kind of making journalism fun and we still
that's what I'm
are
saying. Yeah,
reporting it. But at the end of the day, it's just like you got to look at the stories that we are reporting. Amazing how they do report it because it does bring that fun aspect. And that's a nice thing too. It's just like it's interesting how many stories where now we have front page news where we kind of bring a little bit more topics that are like kind of popular in the world at the moment. So the fact that they're kind of taking takes on that now, um, kind of a little bit more debatable if there is like that one story that is like you either go one way or the other. But at the end of the day, it's just like we still are just a fun group. It's just like don't take life too seriously. It's just like have your opinion, but it's like at the end of the day, all amazing guys. So it's like you kind of know yourself more than anybody else.
yeah, I love that. I love that, and that's why you guys, for me, feel this sincerity to the podcast. It's like a bunch of guys, like you said, just want to have some fun, want to tell some funny stories, and there's nothing sinister or like there's nothing like provocative that you guys are trying to, elicit. It's kind of like, no, this is like this is a place to look at journalism from a different angle, instead of it being like I was mentioning earlier, my dad's favorite outlet, 60 Minutes. It's not your dad's 60 Minutes,
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing too, is just like, as goofy, as funny as it is, at the end of the day, if I was to be the one and be like, okay, go do what they do, I wouldn't be able to piece together what they do. So it really shows the true amount of effort and journalism that they do have to actually dig to report, to just kind of think of these ideas on, okay, we have this news story, what can we kind of do with it?
Yeah. And you brought in my mindset too, right? Like, I'll be honest, when I hear journalism, I think of like what Joe Rogan always kind of like shades on, where you have CNN and, these on-site reporters, kind of like documenting war zones and like, cobalt mines and things like that.
Yeah.
But journalism, like filmmaking, there's a broad spectrum, there's all sorts of forms of it. And what you guys do is journalism, right? You guys are reporting a story, no matter how ludicrous or comedic it is. And yeah, it's entertaining, and that's what it is at the end of the day. And I think that's why you guys, I see it like becoming more successful. Self-aware, self-awareness is so critical. It's like the first step to identifying, your position in the market and where you're going forward. You know what I mean?
Even we did it just actually dropped yesterday.
Yeah, of course.
When Biden came to Ottawa recently, I was just like, man, we should do something with that. And he's like, Jacob's like, what should we do? I'm like, I don't know, let's just kind of see what we should do with it. So we went out, got some footage, and at the end of the day, it's just like, we technically went as journalists to kind of see what's going on, talk to some people. But at the end of the day, you go watch the video, it's like, man, that still has that down to the wire feel to it, where it's like people are getting all mad about politics and stuff. And it's like, man, Biden's coming to the city. We're just happy that he's here. We don't really have an opinion on it, but it's just like, let's go down to the wire. Joe Biden coming to the city. So we went and made some little video about this. And at the end of the day, nothing too serious. It was very lighthearted. So it was little stuff like that, where I was like, yeah, that was like my first like journalism thing I've ever done in my life. Even though it's not much, it was still something at the end of the day. So it's even just once again coming back to the fact that like coming from Thunder Bay to Ottawa, like Ottawa is like my Disney World, like all the time. I just kind of have to pinch myself of like the life that I live, of the stuff that I'm doing. I was just like, and if you talk to me myself like 2 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, Joe Biden's gonna drive by and wave to you. I'd been like, why would I be waving to Joe Biden? But the fact that Ottawa's brought me that much opportunity,
it's crazy.
And that's the thing that we do talk about on the podcast a good amount too. It's just like how much Ottawa does have to give, because people in Ottawa, they're like, oh yeah, Ottawa's boring, this and that. I'm like, that's one thing coming from an outsider to kind of move to Ottawa, seeing how many artists that we do have, whether it be hip hop, country, musician, poets, like just in that sense of like the amount of talent that we do have in Ottawa. Once again, you go out to Thunder Bay, whereas like there's really nothing. So the fact that I'm doing the stuff that I do here, it's still one of those pinch myself moments again.
It's amazing how like perceptions are all relative, because I have to say the way you revere Ottawa, right? But it makes sense because you're coming from Thunder Bay.
Yeah, and I talk so highly of Ottawa, it's ridiculous.
But do you know what I mean? Like, not to shit on those two cities, but you're absolutely right. Like me, I'm from Toronto. Love Toronto. I was born there, born in the city. Raised partially more so outside of the city all my life. Going to Ottawa, I loved it in a sense, because I'm the kind of guy that's a little bit more open-minded, and I was like, oh, you know what? Like, for me, this is how I describe it, because I'm from Toronto. It's like cute, it's cozy. You know what I mean? It's like this little city.
Perfect balance.
Yeah, it seems a little bit more intimate. You know what I mean? Like Toronto's very like, it's like New York's younger brother, right? Like it's trying to be New York, but it's like still's got that same energy, right?
And so many people would be like, you're a big city guy. And that's another thing too, is like, people would even see back home just like, you're not really a Thunder Bay guy. Just like, you're more like, people would be like, are you from Toronto? And like,
you do have more of those vibes. Even
Toronto people would say that. And I'd be like, no. And then be like, I don't know, you just seem a little bit different than everybody else. And I was like, I was honestly a real big compliment in the sense of like, man, I just to hear that things, and just, I'm not a Thunder Bay guy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Love everybody back home, but it's one of those things where like, Toronto, beautiful city, love it there. But like to live there, I don't think I could do it, because like jumping from home to Toronto would be a bit much. But Ottawa, honestly, I have nothing but
good things. Yeah. And now you live with, you're now with family, and you got like a friend, a group that you cultivated right through this podcast.
For
So
sure.
there's a lot more like to look forward to, as opposed to, just moving to the city and starting from scratch. For me, like I would love to move downtown and have that experience. But in a way, other than the rent cost,
Yeah.
it's intimidating or fright. Yeah, it's intimidating or frightening in a way, because like I'm at that point in my life, my age, where it's like a lot of people are kind of doing their own thing, and like it's very much real, where you have to start fresh, and kind of find new friends, and that's all part of the excitement in a way. But what I'm trying to get at is, with Ottawa, it wasn't as much as you think. Start from scratch. You had like a basis to kind of a foundation to build off of, and now everything that comes your way is just a bonus, right? So I'm really happy that you had this positive outlook about moving from Thunder Bay to Ottawa. I think it was really necessary as well, considering that you're a very creative guy, and again, an entrepreneur in your own right. Thunder Bay, not to shit on that city, but I
Oh,
haven't really
honestly, you
heard.
can shit on Thunder Bay as much as you
Right?
want.
Yeah, like
If
I
there's
haven't really
anybody that
heard
shits
much
on Thunder
comment.
Bay, it's myself. But just like shout out all my friends back home. But man, do I ever hate that city.
Right. Yeah. So you've been there your whole life up until a year ago.
Up until here, yeah, up
That's
until a year
great.
ago, and
And how
honestly,
old are you,
best
by the way?
decision.
Like how many years?
23,
23.
23.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, your whole life, yeah. And you went to school there, or where did you go to
In Ottawa
school?
or back home?
No, like where'd you go to university? Did you ever have that experience, like you moved out, or no?
No, really, the only reason why. So I actually was supposed to move to Ottawa. I quit my job, and then back home, I had this big plan. I'm like, screw it, I'm moving to Ottawa, starting this new life. And then
Nice.
2 weeks later, COVID hit.
Ah.
So I was just like, 2 years late, I finally moved to Ottawa, but it's like, thank God I didn't end up moving like a month prior. Otherwise, I would have been an entire lockdown,
Yeah, you would
and
have been stranded. Yeah.
I would have been stranded here. But at the end of this, like, no matter what, kind of life is just gonna create its own path for you. It's just
Oh,
like you never know.
100%. Yeah,
It's
you and
like
I have a very similar path. Like I think a lot of creatives do. Um, at the end of 2019, I kind of like told my family, I was 24, 25 at the time. I said, I've been working a lot of odd jobs. Like I was that artist, right? Like working crazy, stupid jobs,
mhm,
retail, sales, whatever. And I said, it's taking away from my mental health. It's damaging, very taxing on my soul. I need to do something that's going to fulfill my
sure.
soul, fulfill my creative ambitions. So I want to just go full throttle into this filmmaking dream, and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. After a year, you can judge me, but in that year, don't talk. You know what I mean? Like, just please give me
Honestly,
that time. No, because you really do, as a creative. I really believe you need that. People take a year off to go to Europe to discover themselves. I feel like for creatives, you got to give yourself at least that 1 year to just focus on that dream. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying, what happened is that January 2020, started developing the production company, 94 Productions. February, started acquiring some clients, very small, start doing some projects, planting my seeds here. March, it's announced the pandemic's
mhm,
taking over the world. And I was in the same boat as you, man. I actually went into a little bit of a depression for like 2 or 3 months thereafter. And I got myself out of it, read the book Power of Now. My sister, shout out to her. She gave that to me to help me out of it. And like you said, I realized that life's going to always happen. The question is, will you allow it to happen to you? Right. So I
definitely.
just kind of like took it, took the straps, took the bootstraps. What's the expression? I don't even know what I'm saying, but I just like kind of took
Took
that
the
to
bull by
heart.
the horn.
Yeah, pull it to, yeah.
That's what it. Yeah.
Exactly. My mind's like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like a tongue twister for the mind. But yeah, I essentially just kind of took that to heart. And I just kind of went for it. And here I am today. Obviously, you always wish as a creative you'd be in different positions, but you got to be grateful for the present moment. And I'm sure you can attest to the same.
For sure. And it's just one of those things where it's like kind of being like back home, like during that COVID times, like in that dark spot, it's like anything that would happen bad back home, I'd be like, dang, this wouldn't happen in Ottawa. So it was like a double angry. It'd be like, oh, if I spill a
Yeah.
glass of milk on the floor, it'll be like, man, if I was in Ottawa, this wouldn't be an issue. But it's one of those things too, where it's just like, I even met my girlfriend my second week moving here. So it's
Oh, that's
like,
awesome, man.
it's
Yeah. Look
just
at this
crazy. It's
guy.
just like, man, I really lucked out on that sense. So
Yeah, man.
it's been amazing since moving here. But even the sense of I talk highly about this in comparison to back home,
Mhm.
would be the support of the city that Ottawa has for each other. So reason why lots of people don't really start up a podcast or a musician, it's just like back home you'll get ripped apart, like what is this person doing? But I find here in Ottawa it's like people show mad love to each other. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I do enjoy, and that makes me feel a lot more comfortable in the sense of like I'll go be a co-producer for Down the Wire, or back home I wouldn't be doing this, just because that overall acceptance is people just they get excited for you. Whereas back home they'd be like, why? Like they just don't really have that belief just because it's just so bubbled off there.
Yeah.
Whereas here, that's one thing that people will be like, oh, it's so hard to like get out of Ottawa. And I'm like, yes, because you're saying that as an Ottawa resident, but it's like here, I just feel so much love from just all the support. It's been really
Yeah,
good since moving here.
that's what I'm saying, man. It's all relative, right? Like there were a lot of times where I would, shit on Toronto in a sense because I was like going through my own inner frustrations about, the people and the nature of the city and this and that. And I realized after my travels, right, after going to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York and places in Europe, that
Now
it's
you
all
did the full
relative.
tour. You did the full tour with Nima.
No. I'm saying like just aside, like personal. I did the tour,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
In Canada, I did like Montreal and Vancouver and
yeah.
things like that. But what I'm saying is like for myself, like my own personal experiences, you kind of realize it's all the same. It's really how you make of it, as cliche as it
For
sounds.
sure.
And you're an embodiment of that. Like you come from Thunder Bay and you're going to Ottawa and you're just taking it all in and you're just so appreciative of everything that the city has to offer. And I know for a fact, because I have friends from there, that they would say the opposite. Like there's not really much going there, but it's really all how you make of it. So it's something that's quite admirable, and it's something to be taken into consideration just listening to this podcast. If I can learn something from you, right? It's
Yeah, it
kind of
really at the
just
end of the
be
day is
grateful.
like perspective, and that's one thing. Even just recently, of just myself, of just like, man, you just every situation that kind of comes your way, it's just like, oh, I didn't land this certain artist, or like you wanted to film a movie with this certain person, but it's just like, man, the fact that you even make movies, it's just like that's
Yes,
amazing as itself. Or man, you
that's
have a
true,
finger
man.
fall off. It's just like, man, I got four more. It's like you have people with no arms. So it's really just that
Yeah.
overall just being present into the moment. That's really perspective at the end of the day. That's one thing as of recently I just been trying to get a little bit more involved with, even for myself, of just being appreciative in that sense of just like, man, I had a bad day, like, oh, my car got scratched. It's like, man, I have a car. There's people
Yeah,
that are walking to work every single day.
I'm
And at
barefoot.
the end of the day, it's a very hard
Yeah.
thing to do consistently, but once you kind of start thinking in that kind of sense, you really just the really small things of even just seeing the friends that you have, of just like, oh, I don't really get to see that person that I used to see all the time. It's like, okay, but I did see that person, and I finally got to like see them one on one again. It's like being appreciative during that time. It's life's too short for kind of just getting upset about the little things. So it's
Yeah, man.
kind
You're
of just
saying all the right
perspective.
things, man. Like I love your attitude, love your mindset towards it. It's very positive, and it's uplifting. It's something to be again, uh, something to learn from. And that's what it is. It's like I used to during the pandemic write a list. I kind of lost track of that, but write a list of all the things I was grateful for. Right, like I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my career. Um, and I'm guilty of that. I quite recently like gone through that where it's like I wish I had this and I wish I had that. And some people like could argue, well, I wish I had your life, right? Like I wish I had an internet connection. I wish I
Yeah,
had, food in the fridge. I wish I lived in the city that you live in, right? Again,
definitely.
speaking from your experience, right? It's like I could have been a guy from Thunder Bay with a huge, highly ambitious you know, drive to become a filmmaker, a prominent filmmaker, and be stuck in a small town city, or like maybe just not have the resources enough to get me out of that funk. You know what I mean? That like that mindset. So like it could have gone any which way, but I'm here now and I have to make the most of it. So that's what we kind of like took from you out of this conversation. And like I said, man, it's very inspiring. For me, I just uh yeah, as a filmmaker, you or as a creative, I should say rather, you just get caught up in the day-to-day hustle, and you compare yourself sometimes with social media and what people are up to. Also your present moment, like your age. I know society tries society tells us our age is a determinant of where we should be in
Mm-hmm.
our life, but it's the other way around, right? So it's like that's why I kind of got to tell myself, but glad to hear that you're coping with it all.
Oh, 100%. So yeah, just overall just being appreciative of just everything that kind of comes your way. Even the fact that like I feel like people even back home, I feel like that disconnect in the sense of like when I do go back home, it's just that overall feeling of like, man, I appreciate every little aspect. And it's just the little stuff that your friends say. And it's like if you haven't
Yeah.
heard that saying in like 5 months, it's just like, man, I just love that you said that because I'm not going to hear it for the next year. So it's like really just kind of shows you perspective on like how short the moments really are.
That's awesome, bro. That's well said. So before we go, I want to know, like, with Hold Down to the Wire podcast, you being a co-producer, and you've now, like, hinted at some small contributions you've made to the podcast thus far, especially with TikTok. How do you intend on improving the podcast's social media presence and garnering viewership? Like, what's the next step?
I would say, like I mentioned before, really that Gary Vaynerchuk type of style of just that consistency,
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
Because just overall, I have that belief in these guys at the end of the day.
Nice.
It's just the amount of guests that we have for the show that are like having Nima on, having these artists like Two Time, like the fact that Two Time, I don't know if you ever heard of them, but local Ottawa artists who, once again, I could be listening to Drake, I could be listening to The Weeknd. No, I go choose Two Time. So like having these types of guests, the fact that we have the people that we're on, just overall get the overall views to where the respect that Down the Wire kind of deserves, because we're having great content, we're having amazing guests on, but it's like we really want to get the views, the overall respect of the city. But once again, it's that overall, if not if, it's when. But really just the consistency, just try to push content more than anything, try to work the algorithm. Even the little stuff of like the hooks, the first like 2 seconds of the video, that's one thing I am big on.
Right.
I'm just like, okay, people just don't have the attention span anymore. They're not here. Like that's why Vine was so successful, is because 6-7 second videos. We didn't have any other type of social media that was like that up until Vine was a thing.
Exactly.
So I think that was really the changing aspect of, okay, that first few seconds is really the most important. It's like, okay, can we get that person's retention? And that's one thing I really kind of speak to the guys in the sense of, we have to get somehow that person that's scrolling on their phone in their bed, we need to get them to stop scrolling, watch that video for 3 seconds. Okay, they're in here for 3 seconds. Do we make it important enough? Can we get it to 7 seconds? Next thing you know, they're 43 seconds in. Now we have that view. Now let's get to as many videos as we can, in that sense of like, let's get the people engaged, let's get them entertained. But I don't see that being an issue with us. It's really just that consistency. We're still young. Over the next course of the year, we're going to have a bunch of new guests that are going to be on the show, lots of new content, lots of street videos, stuff like that.
Including
so me. I feel like this is the year, even before this kind of year started out, I was like, guys, this is going to be our year. But like, even that sense of, we have to make it this year. Like, it's not an option. It's like, if we're going to do this, let's go 100% on this. So I feel like that's how we're kind of going about it so far. Still, like anything that we kind of put our minds to, is there always room for improvement. So we're kind of just buffering, feeling ourselves out at the end of the day, by really just pushing content, really just making that quality, consistent content, really playing with the algorithm. That's something I think is just going to bring us all for success. But I feel it's honestly just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's true, man. It's just a matter of time, and you have the right mindset. Like I said from the beginning of the podcast, whether it's you moving to Ottawa or developing this podcast with your third cousin Jacob Racco, you need to have that mindset of Gary Vee. Just put it out there. You don't strike me as someone that's a perfectionist, and maybe you are, but you don't get caught up in the idea of it has to be perfect in order to be put out. Because too many people I've worked with, had that notion, and you don't hear from them today. In other words, like, they're not doing the same things that I'm doing, and it really bogs you down. And you can't have that, because again, there's a much more aggressive competition than there was, decades ago. And aside from that, you can't really afford to, with the time that you're given on this planet, to just kind of, owe it to like, oh, it's being about being a perfectionist, and I can't, get to this result because, I get in my own head. You can't have that. You just got to put it out sometimes. It's not always going to be perfect, right? Like this episode, who's to say like it's the best episode I ever put out? But at the same time, I'm going to put it out because someone out there, because I've had this experience, someone out there will find something that resonates with them or uplifts them or inspires them to do better, or to kind of see something within themselves, or at its very basics, it's just something that's entertaining. And if I took,
So I was just gonna say, in the sense of like, really just doing it something that you love. There's just like, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to be doing this. Of like, I still, like I said, I'm living out my dream doing this, even though I just have a small part in Down on the Wire. It's just like the fact that I'm like, before I even joined the crew, I told Rocco, I said, I don't care, even if I don't care what my role is. If it's bringing you guys coffee, I'll bring you guys coffee. I'll be the guy who goes and runs errands for you. Like, I really don't care. The fact that I'm part of this, because I could be the number one guy or the lowest guy. I really don't care. The fact that I'm part of something that, shout out my boy Pat back home, because we used to just be in his basement and dream about this, because it's one thing that we were just stuck there and we wanted to get out and do something like this. So it's just like that, manifesting it, I didn't expect it to happen. So the fact that it kind of did happen, or it's a nice thing that I've kind of go through
That's
and
awesome,
kind of experience. So
yeah,
I'm excited for the future for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited for you guys. And like I said, I'm happy to be a guest on your podcast next time I'm in the city, and bring it to any which way I can, help bring it to new heights. So it was a pleasure, Daniel Hill. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, giving us an insight on Down to the Wire. Everybody check it out, Down to the Wire podcast on all platforms, social media platforms. And stay tuned for more exciting content from them. And
thank you so much.
on that, yeah, of course. On that note, thank you again, Daniel Hill, for coming on the podcast. Thanks everybody else for listening, and we'll talk soon.